I received a question today on the Facebook page that is associated with this channel, and somebody asked me to talk about physical health issues. She said she's had a lot of health issues and tried a lot of different things and hasn't had a lot of success. And I do believe that if we run across on the internet or somewhere some one-size-fits-all solution, then to be very wary of that, because if it was simple, then everybody would tell everyone about it and nobody would be sick. But ultimately, I believe that illness always serves a purpose, and there's some lesson behind it. And it may not be the lesson that we want, and it may not be easy to figure out quickly, but if we approach illness with humility and with an open mind and let go of various templates and teachings that our culture has taught us about what illness is and how to fix it, then we can be receptive to solutions. I'm going to share my perspective and perspectives on how I approach physical health in case there's anything that is of help on your path. Now, regarding this one-size-fits-all approach that people use, a lot of times I believe that people get into this in the realm of what they eat. And there are actual eating disorders that are related to a fear of impure food. Anything with pesticides, might make you sick and kill you and stuff like that. It can get out of balance. Restrictive diets are an attempt to feel better through letting go of things that you enjoy, which is not my approach. If it works for somebody, that's great, but I don't see that as a cure-all or a one-size-fits-all approach to health that is useful or effective. I've explored various, types of restrictive kind of things, doing a organic, vegan, kind of approach, and didn't really get to the core of what I needed at the time. And throughout life, it's usually, I find, about relationships, about setting boundaries, dealing with unfinished business, and if there's unfinished business and problems in the relational realm, either past or present, then a lot of times that manifests within the body as illness and so forth. So, in terms of food, I pretty much anything in a regular grocery store, I am not afraid of it. I trust that my body will take what it wants and leave out what it doesn't need. And I think that basically, it's about staying in balance, not about denying anything that you like, but keeping it in balance. And I find that caloric intake is really what determines your weight, how many calories you take in, and so getting enough protein, vitamins and minerals. I take a daily supplement for like a multivitamin, multi-mineral thing. But in case the food I'm eating does not cover all the bases. But I believe that if you are eating too much because you're trying to suppress pain, I think a lot of times obesity, which is a very common, very, very big problem in America, comes from people stuffing their pain instead of feeling it. If you follow Eckhart Tolle's work, then feeling the pain body is a great teaching within that, because it's about letting pain come up, feeling it, and then transmuting it into greater consciousness. And food is a way of temporarily getting away from your feelings and the discomfort of your feelings. So I think that is oftenly, abused, and it can lead to a lot of systemic health problems if you are significantly overweight. And I don't believe that we should strive towards, having some kind of, model type abs or whatever like that people get fixated on the other end of the spectrum of health. And then I think it becomes unhealthy to over-identify with your body as if that's the way that you get attention and love and that kind of thing like that. But again, balance is a common theme. And regarding exercise, that's something that people can obsess about as well. For a long time I didn't exercise at all. Starting probably over 2.5 years ago, I started to daily do some kind of exercise, jogging, weights for about half an hour and so forth. And it works well for me. I think that if you don't have a job that has activity built into it, then it's very easy to just, be sedentary and just kind of absorb information all day. And exercise, I think it can move your attention from your mind into your body, which can bring some balance. And I also like Deepak Chopra's perspective on exercise, that it is a way of battling against entropy, which is the decay cycle in the universe, basically, things breaking down. Organized information is a way of looking at exercise that brings a kind of structure to go against entropy. And I find that exercising, not overdoing it, but just keeping my body in motion once a day works well for me. And, I think everybody should experiment and find their own way with that, but question purely sedentary existence, because that can also lead to systemic health problems. Generally speaking, regarding health, I believe in the mind-body connection. I once ran into a guy, I ran into him like probably 4 or 5 different times. He was kind of a wandering guru in Arizona when I lived there, in Tempe and Phoenix area. And once he just came up to me. I was at a newsstand, and he had recognized me from some previous conversation we had, and he goes up to me and he said, anytime that you have any kind of health problems, you're not feeling well, it's because you've taken on someone else's stuff. And that stayed with me. I have a little drink. Now, I don't believe it's always the case, but it's certainly something to keep in mind. Are we taking on someone else's stuff, someone else's dysfunction, someone else's, kind of neurotic behavior and so forth, and integrating it into our own system and feeling their stuff when it's not even really ours? Something to keep in mind. Another perspective that I like is Louise Hay's, mind-body perspective, that basically looks at different kinds of problems as having specific associated emotional causes. Now, basically, I look at the body as a barometer of how am I doing emotionally and psychologically. And my underlying perspective is, if you take care of the little things, then you won't need to manifest big problems. In other words, if you're having little aches and pains and other kinds of things coming up, and you look at the root of those and you heal what is beneath those problems, then you won't need to manifest like a big heart attack or stroke. I look at different levels of wake-up calls are what the body is trying to tell us, that something needs to change, something needs to be modified in our life. So I think that Louise Hay, looking at her work and, seeing how she associates certain, if you're having a problem with a headache or whatever like that, then you can look to see what is her connection there and use that as a starting point. But at the same time, I don't think that it is always as simple as one kind of problem meaning the same thing for all people. For example, the one time I really had a big, kind of medical kind of situation in my life, I was 5 years old, and I had to go in for a stomach hernia operation, and then several months later I had to go in again and get a second one. So that was my early kind of experience with Western medicine, and symbolically I think it was a little way of me remembering I don't like the way a hospital feels. It did not feel safe, it did not feel good. And so since then, maybe redirecting my attention in alternative ways because of this early experience. However, this experience that I had at 5 was right before my parents got divorced. And so my stomach, associated with sensitivity, feeling other people's energy, feeling other people's stuff. I don't have conscious memories of them arguing or there being tension and stuff. I think they kept that under wraps. But I probably was sensing, feeling on some level a disruption in the family, that there was about to be a divorce, and that may have been a way of it manifesting physically as these scars down in my area that represents a kind of safety, security, centeredness, and so forth. So you can look at like a Louise Hay perspective, but also be open to other interpretations, listen to your inner guidance, look for symbolic connections as to what your particular illness or disease could relate to in your own life. So ultimately, I believe that our body is our friend in terms of it. We don't like to feel bad, but sometimes when we feel bad, it's because there's something we need to learn. There's something we need to look at and reevaluate in our life and change something. So, if you're not having success with that realm, you might want to try alternative healing modalities. Take some herbs, go to an acupuncturist. There are a lot of different ways outside of Western medicine to treat the body that are oftentimes less abrasive than Western medical procedures. And so, I generally, when it comes to alternative treatments and herbs and so forth, haven't had a lot of success in that realm. I will still try these kind of remedies and so forth, see how it works, be open to that. But I do believe that my personal path has largely been about looking at the mind-body connection, see what my body's trying to tell me, and change what needs to be changed in my life, in my relationships, in my thinking, in how I'm handling different situations, career issues, financial questions, those kind of things like that. So I believe that there can be a placebo effect with a lot of different treatments. Ultimately, I think a lot of things come back to the mind. If you fully believe that taking some remedy or trying some technique will heal you, then it probably will because you believe it will. It's a huge impact, what we believe. And that's any kind of treatment whatsoever. I think that Western medical techniques, I look at them as a backup. As for myself, in addition to the early surgeries I had when I was 5, haven't had much interaction with Western medicine other than went through a period as a teen or a young preteen or whatever, trying to diagnose this discomfort in my stomach. And ultimately, I think it was because I was a sensitive kid who went to a different school every year due to family moving and stuff from like 4th grade through 8th grade, a lot of transition, absorbing the unconsciousness of a traditional school environment and just it manifesting in my stomach. But, I was young, 12, whatever, 13. And when these problems really started coming up strongly, so I was not, growing up in the area where I did, a small, relatively small city in Michigan, not a lot of mind-body perspective. So I'd get diagnosed, I'd take upper GI, lower GI, everyone looking for some kind of blood and bleeding ulcer, what is the medical thing? And it wasn't really till years later that I could look back and say it was stress. It was stress because of my sensitivity and absorbing negativity. Basically my body saying, I don't want to be around unconsciousness, but not knowing at that time how to look at it. Another time I dealt with Western medicine was for anxiety. Around the time that I started, I worked as a counselor, a therapist, and I was going through my spiritual awakening around that same time, but I was still open through my exposure to various treatments in that realm to taking something for anxiety. So for a while I took Buspar, and I had some success with that, but what my body was really trying to tell me through anxiety was that I didn't want to work as a therapist. I didn't want to be living where I was living in Phoenix. I wanted to move to California. Didn't want to be around certain people that I was around in my life. There was a lot of messages that the anxiety was trying to tell me, but to function in that realm, I took Buspar, low dosage, for a while, and, it seemed to help me cope. But later on, several years later, quite a few years later after that time period in my life, when my father died, it was very shocking and brought up a lot of grief. And one of the things that I tried was taking Goose Bar again. And the first time that I took a pill, when it set in, I felt dizzy, disoriented, out of touch with my body. It was scary and just really uncomfortable. I'd never had those kind of negative symptoms earlier when I was more armored. And I didn't try it again. I haven't taken any psychiatric medication since then for anxiety or anything else. And that was close to 10 years ago. And I believe that my body was rejecting it at that time because it was saying, you've got to feel this grief. Because the grief of my father's death was not just about grieving him. It was a catalyst for all kinds of other grieving that I didn't do, that I blocked, that I just skipped ahead from in life. And so I had to cry, I had to feel my pain and let it come out and not try to block it with medication. So I went through a lot of sadness and grief, but did not suppress it with medical techniques and so forth. I think that with Western medicine, a lot of times the problem is if your body is trying to tell you something and you go in and you treat it with some kind of medication or surgery or whatever, then it can just pop up again elsewhere. Now, if that's the best you can do in terms of, alleviating pain and you haven't been able to find anything else that is helpful, then go for it. I mean, if I'm in enough pain, I'm going to do whatever works. I'm not going to be a martyr or cling to an ideology even when I'm suffering so badly that I cannot function in life or whatever. So I think that Western medicine has its place and so forth. But the problem is, there's a saying that when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I heard a doctor speak recently about how the three tools they basically have are the therapeutic interaction, pills, and surgery. And a lot of times there's not a lot of therapeutic interaction in going to see a doctor. It tends to be a rushed experience. A lot of little meetings are just tell me enough so that I can prescribe something or whatever. So the hammer, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That can often lead to prescription medication or surgery pretty quickly. And I think that the pharmaceutical companies do a lot to manipulate and influence in any way they can to make sure that a pill is the solution. And again, you might suppress what's coming up with that, but if your body is trying to tell you something, it's going to come up maybe elsewhere and maybe more strongly the second time around, so you cannot get rid of it easily and you cannot ignore it. But if you need Western medical treatment and you feel that it's best for you, go for it. And there are some people, they get something treated and then that's the end of it and so forth. There's some lesson in that of the self-care of getting treated, allowing yourself to be taken care of. But I do believe that a lot of us need to get away from looking at doctors as some kind of like God-type entity that has all the answers for illness and they're going to take care of everything, because they're only as good as their training and their belief system, which does not cover all perspectives in the realm of healing. Lastly, if nothing works, then sometimes suffering through some kind of health problem can be about surrendering. I think of Eckhart Tolle and his teaching that what we perceive as a limitation often is an opening to greater depth. Now, I haven't had a lot of severe suffering, but I have had a lot of insomnia, and there are times in which how I approach it is an opportunity. If I say, I'm just so pissed off that I can't fall back asleep or that I can't go to sleep and, get angry at God and just, get just really in a victim mentality, that's practicing a kind of martyristic, victimized kind of thought pattern that I need to transcend above. Or I can look at it like, here I am, I'm awake, I would prefer to be asleep, but I'm not, so how can I best surrender to this moment? And if we're in great pain, I remember once having a toothache that, was very strong pain, but how I looked at it and how I interacted with it changed my experience of it. I think that having had done, by the time of that toothache, a lot of work on feeling my pain body, on just practicing surrendering without judgment to feeling the discomfort, the anxiety, or whatever it is that I'm feeling, it helped me to move through that toothache. It's not to say I didn't take ibuprofen or whatever, as well, because I do think that, again, not being a martyr when there's pain is useful. But just saying, there it is. There's a throbbing, and I've heard, again, Eckhart Tolle talking about pain. There's a certain vibration to it, but, it's not that bad. It's not going to kill you. And that's a lot of times the thing with pain. We say to ourselves unconsciously, perhaps, this could kill me. And that brings up a lot of fear, a lot of resistance, a lot of fighting. But sometimes the best way to transcend pain is to just surrender to it. And so if you've tried everything, nothing works for you, you cannot figure it out, that doesn't mean that you won't eventually figure it out and resolve the pain. There is always hope for some information to come into your life that is going to help you to resolve what your discomfort is. But in the interim, you can integrate discomfort as part of your spiritual practice, that you interact with your pain and what thoughts you choose and the perspective you choose in terms of surrender or fighting against can highly influence how you experience it. So hopefully something that I've said within this will be helpful for you in terms of your interaction with health. Thanks for listening.